1. Nightmare. A man went to prison. The prison had bunk beds. The strange thing was that the guy on the upper bunk seemed to be mute and never spoke. From the first day he went to prison, he often had nightmares, and the content of the dreams was always the same. He dreamed that he was walking in a dark alley and a woman in a red skirt killed a child. He wanted to call for help, but his throat was unable to make a sound and he couldn't move. In less than a month, this person was tortured beyond words. That night, he no longer slept but kept his eyes wide open and persisted. In the middle of the night, he suddenly heard the man on the upper bunk talking. His voice was very low, as if he was talking in his sleep or telling a story. He listened carefully for a while and suddenly felt creepy. You are walking in a dark alley. The light around you is very dim. You see a woman in a red dress. She raises a knife and kills a child. 2 windows. A female reporter went to the countryside to collect materials and stayed in a shabby little hotel at night. After entering the room, the light was very dim. There is a painting opposite the bed. It shows a man with sharp features and lifelike features, especially his eyes. When she went to bed at night, she always felt that someone was watching her in the dark, so she decided to try not to look at the painting. The next morning, when she walked over and took a look, her scalp went numb. It turned out that it was not a painting, but a window. 3. Losing things. A person received a phone call at work, and the other party only said one sentence. Something was lost in your home. After returning home, this person rummaged through all the drawers and searched for a long time, but nothing was missing, including his ID card, bank card, mobile phone, wallet. He suspected it was a prank. That night, in the middle of the night, someone whispered in his ear in an eerie voice, "You lost a key." For thief. A girl living alone in a rental house vaguely felt someone rummaging through the closet at night. She suddenly realized it was a thief, but the timid girl didn't dare to get up, so she had to close her eyes and pretend to sleep until she heard no more noise. She thought the thief had left, so she let out a long breath and was about to get up when someone suddenly whispered in her ear, "I know you are not asleep." 5. Daughter. A family had a daughter who died of a sudden heart attack. Everything happened suddenly. The parents were heartbroken, and in order to avoid being reminded of the past by seeing their daughter's body, they buried her hastily behind the house. In the middle of the night, the parents heard the sound of nails scraping wood in the bushes behind the house. The old couple felt creepy and everyone said it was haunted. As time passed, the old couple gradually forgot about it. A few years later, the family moved the grave and opened the coffin, seeing the old couple crying bitterly. There were marks of fingernails on the coffin lid, and the clothes on her body and the quilt underneath her were torn into strips. Turned out that a few years ago, this girl was buried alive. 6. Watches. A river not wide at first sight, but deep. A boatman was ferrying people across the river. This was a pirate ship, and the boatman was a mean guy. One day, a city dweller took his boat to cross the river, took off his glittering watch, and wound it up. In those days, mechanical watches were a luxury. The boatman had evil intentions and stepped forward to grab it. The city dweller struggled hard, so the boatman took up the wooden oar, killed the city dweller, tied a big stone to it, and threw it into the river. The boatman put on a mechanical watch and continued to ferry people over the bodies of the townspeople. A few days later, he accidentally dropped his watch into the river. He jumped in to salvage it, but he didn't find the watch, only the body. 12 years later, the boatman stopped ferrying people across the river. On this day, he fished in the river, but he didn't catch any fish until it was dark and sunset, and he couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. In the last net, he pulled up a metal object, which turned out to be the watch he dropped into the river. To his surprise, the watch was still moving. How could it still be moving after 12 years? The boatman was wondering when suddenly a head popped out of the water. It was the city dweller. He looked pale but smiled and said, "I wind it up underwater every day."
7. Mining accident.
A deep mine collapsed, killing 7 or 8 workers. One of them was lucky enough to hide in a small space at the moment of the landslide, while the rest were killed by the falling rubble. The air in the mine is thin and physical strength is consumed very quickly. Under normal circumstances, a person can survive 5 to 7 days without eating, but here they can only survive 2 or 3 days. The terrain here is complex, and it will take at least 20 days to open the cave. There is water in the mine but no food, so the person inside is dead. No one on the ground wanted to waste manpower and resources, but the superiors gave a death order. If the person is alive, they must be found. If he is dead, they must be found dead. After more than 20 days and nights of hard work, the search and rescue team finally rescued this lucky guy. The moment he saw the sunlight, he went crazy. Clearly 8 people died, but only 6 bodies were found. Where did the remaining person go?
8 dormeren.
A man moved into a new house and got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. He felt as if someone was watching him. He put his eyes to the door mirror, but it was pitch black and he could not see anything. There is clearly a light in the corridor. Could it be that the voice-controlled light is broken? The next day, when he went downstairs, he found that the voice-controlled light was not broken, but was very sensitive. He walked to the door of his house nervously and looked. The door mirror is installed upside down. 9. Blind. There was a female college student who worked as a nanny for a blind old lady during the holidays. The old lady lived in the suburbs, and the car drove around in many ways before finally stopping in an unfamiliar environment. On the first day she arrived at this house, the girl felt that someone was hiding in the dark and watching her. She suspected that there was another person in the house that she couldn't see. This went on for several days. One night, when the girl went to the bathroom, she suddenly discovered that the light was on in the old lady's room. 10. Roommates. A girl and her roommates shared a 2-bedroom, 1 living room apartment off campus. In the middle of the night, the girl heard the sound of fingernails scratching the wall above her head. It was so sharp and piercing that she felt extremely uncomfortable. She knew that her roommate was naughty and playful and loved to joke. So I took out my cell phone and sent a WeChat message to my roommate. "Honey, stop making trouble." My roommate replied, "What's the fuss? My boyfriend is here and I'm not going back home today." 11. Bed. A woman went to the city to work and rented a very small house. The landlord said, "There is a girl living with you, is that okay?" The woman said, "It would be better if we share the rent. I don't have much money. Where is she?" The landlord said, "She will be back in the evening." After the landlord left, the woman suddenly realized that there was only 1 bed in the house. So where would the girl live when she came back? So she quickly called the landlord and told him that the house was still missing a bed. The landlord was surprised and said, "Aren't there bunk beds in that house?" The woman smiled and said, "No." The landlord said, "I'll go check it out tomorrow. By the way, the person sleeping on the lower bunk pays 1/3 of the rent, and the person sleeping on the upper bunk pays 2/3 of the rent. You should discuss it carefully about who will sleep on the upper bunk and who will sleep on the lower bunk." After hanging up the phone, the woman felt more and more puzzled. What the landlord said made no sense. It was getting dark soon, and the woman sat alone in the house reading a book. When the girl didn't come back at midnight, she had no choice but to unpack her luggage, spread it on the bed and lie down. Just as she was about to fall asleep, she vaguely heard someone say to her, "Sister, you sleep on the upper bunk and you pay 2/3 of the rent." She woke up with a shiver. Upper bunk? After thinking for a while, she suddenly jumped up, turned on the light, and looked under the bed. The bed sheet was hanging down, revealing only a dark gap. She bent down and slowly lifted the bed sheet. Underneath lay the dried body of a girl. She rushed out the door, taking out her phone to report the crime. At this time, the perverted landlord had already approached the house, holding a key in his left hand and a knife in his right hand. 12. Telephone. On the weekend, a girl asked her classmates to go to the movies. She called the first girl's home, and a man answered the phone and said, "You've dialed the wrong number." She checked it and it was correct. Did this girl move? He called the second girl, but a man answered the phone and said, "You've dialed the wrong number." He was very surprised and called the third girl. A man answered the phone and said, "You have dialed the wrong number." After hanging up the phone, she was stunned because she felt the 3 men are the same person.